There was once a wise old professor who decided to teach his students an important lesson about life's priorities. He gathered them in his classroom one bright morning, with a large, empty glass jar sitting on his desk. The students were curious but unsure of what to expect. The professor began by holding up the empty jar and asking,
"Can anyone tell me what this jar represents?"
One eager student raised his hand.
"It's just an empty jar, Professor."
The professor smiled.
"Yes, but it represents your life. Let's see what happens when we fill it."
With that, he took a large bag of rocks, big, heavy stones, and began placing them one by one into the jar. He packed them in tightly until no more could fit. The jar was almost full.
"Do you think the jar is full?"
The professor asked. Most of the students nodded.
Yes, it's full.
The professor grinned and reached under the desk to pull out a bag of pebbles. He slowly began pouring the pebbles into the jar, and to everyone's surprise, the pebbles slipped into the spaces between the large rocks. When he finished, the jar looked even fuller.
"Now, is the jar full?"
He asked again. The students were a bit unsure now.
"Maybe,"
one of them said. The professor then took a container of sand. He slowly poured the sand into the jar, and just like the pebbles, the sand filled the small gaps between the rocks and pebbles. When the last bit of sand was in, he asked again.
"Now is the jar full?"
This time, the students were certain.
Yes,
they said.
"Now the jar is full."
The professor paused for a moment, letting the lesson sink in. Then he looked at his students and said,
"Let me explain what this jar and its contents represent. The large rocks are the most important things in life: your family, your health, your integrity, and your passions. These are the things that matter most and should come first."
He pointed to the pebbles.
"These are the smaller, but still important things: your job, your education, your hobbies, and your friends. They are necessary, but they should not overshadow the big things."
Finally, he pointed to the sand.
"The sand represents all the small, trivial distractions: social media, material possessions, petty worries, and insignificant concerns. These may fill up your time, but if you let them, they will crowd out the things that really matter."
The students were quiet, taking in the lesson. The professor continued.
"If you fill your life with the sand and pebbles first, you will never have room for the big rocks. But if you focus on the rocks, the things that truly matter, you'll find that you'll always have space for the smaller things too."
One of the students, feeling reflective, asked,
"But Professor, what happens if we forget the rocks and let the sand fill up first?"
The professor smiled gently.
"If you do that, you will end up with an empty life, filled with things that don't truly bring you joy or fulfillment. You may find yourself busy, but not really living. The big rocks need to come first."
He paused and added,
"Remember, no matter how busy life gets, always prioritize the important things, the things that give you meaning and purpose. Everything else can wait."
With that, the professor stood up, picked up the jar, and set it back on the desk.
"Now, go and live your life with the right priorities. Make room for what truly matters."
Moral of the story: in life, it's crucial to put your priorities in the right order. Focus on what truly matters, the big things like relationships, health, and purpose, and don't let the small distractions fill up your life. If you keep the big rocks in place, everything else will fall into its rightful place.